Hey, what's up? Welcome to another Access podcast. I'm here with Josh, Adrian, myself, Jared, and Drayson. We're going to have a conversation today regarding singleness and relationships. Let's go. Y'all, I'm fired up about this.
Come on,
We're going
baby.
deep. We're talking today, boys. So we actually came prepped and ready with some questions that we've been kind of meditating on that I feel like the Lord's asked us to go for. So I'm just going to start right in. Josh, was there a specific question that the Lord jumped out at you? Read the question and maybe just share what God was placed on your heart.
Yeah, for sure. The question that kind of stood out to me, I felt, was, is singleness bad? Is it bad to feel lonely?
Oh.
And should I wait to date until I don't feel lonely? And honestly, I would actually like to just pose a couple questions that kind of like, as soon as I read that, like a couple more questions popped in my mind. And the first one was, does dating or marriage cure loneliness?
Oh.
That's good. That's really good.
You know what I mean? Does anybody have a thought on like, when you started, Adrian, you started dating 6-7 months ago, did that cure loneliness for you?
Man, I will say, I thought it would help a little bit.
Emphasis
But
on thought.
But I learned very quickly, I'm like, wow, like the only thing that can actually fulfill the core need of loneliness is like simply Jesus.
Wow.
And there's literally nothing else. Because if you put your hope and trust in another imperfect person to perfect you, like, good luck. Because it's just not, not going to work. It's just simply not going to work. But when you look to someone who literally is perfect and who defeated sin and made you actually strong in your imperfections, like, he will fulfill that core need of loneliness.
So good, bro. So good. That makes me think of Colossians 2, verse 10, where it says, and you are complete in Christ, who is the head of all principality and power.
Yeah.
So in Christ, you've been made complete. But if you're looking, again, to somebody to try to find your sense of completeness, well, dude, that's very well said.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is
But yeah,
good.
to expand on that, I just thought like, I'm now engaged. I'm gonna get married in August, and I thought like the first thing in my mind as I read that question was like, there's days where I like feel lonely and I feel like I'm missing something, and it's because there's days where I haven't spent time with the Lord, or I haven't like prioritized that in my life, and I'm busy with school or with other things. And so I don't think loneliness is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just an emotion that everybody's gonna feel. But like the question I think we have to ask next when you feel loneliness is like, where am I taking this emotion? Like, where do I go with this? Because if you feel lonely and you're like, only God can solve this problem, then that's great, and you know that you're empty without him. But if you feel lonely and you're like, oh man, I need to watch some Netflix, or I need to go hang out with my girlfriend, or I need to go do this, or get my mind off this, like none of that cures loneliness. And so I just don't think any of that was in my mind. Like, I don't think loneliness is necessarily a problem when it comes to relationships. But the second half of that is like the question of, is it bad to, like, should I wait until I'm not lonely to go into a relationship? And what do you guys think of that one?
Yeah, I think going back to that idea of loneliness being a feeling, we're not ruled by our emotions. We're ruled by truth. And so when we go to the Word, like you said, being in the Word, being with the Lord, we actually are able to grow in our identity. Because in the same way, like, not talking about relationships, but Jesus gets angry at the temple. Like, it's okay to have emotions. And so in the same way, when we feel lonely, like, that's an emotion that we're feeling, but that doesn't rule who we are, how we interact with people, or different things like that. And so it's getting back to the truth of understanding how we were created. And when we jump back to that and we understand how we were created, and we don't allow our emotions to rule us, we're able to step into relationships even if we're feeling that loneliness, because we know the truth of who we were created to be, what we were created for. And so when we have that relationship with our Creator, we're not ruled by our emotions. Therefore, we can be angry and still love the people around us. We can be lonely and still find wholeness in ourselves and with people around us. And so I think you don't have to wait, because that's an emotion. It's not an identity. If it's an identity crisis that you're having, that you don't know who you are, then I think it probably is smart to take some time and figure out that truth that you're living in. But I don't think that singleness as an emotion should rule or dictate how you make decisions about what your life looks like.
That's really good.
I've heard emotions equated a lot to like a check engine light. And I think that would be like a good analogy for emotions. You know, when a check engine light, what does it tell you? Something is going on wrong underneath the hood. And you need to take your vehicle to the one who knows your car better than you do,
That's good.
so that he can identify the problem and actually bring a solution.
That's really
And so when
That's
you're
really good.
feeling an emotion, a negative emotion, whether it is loneliness or some other type of negative emotion, use that as like a check engine light. But I don't use my check engine lights to tell me where to go in life. Like I've never once looked at my dash and my check engine light comes on and I'm like, yep, that means, yep, I should turn left here. Like that is,
Yeah.
I don't use my check
good.
engine lights. I don't use the dash lights as like for direction, and we don't use our emotions for direction either. But like when the emotions come up, it's a good signal for me. And the question then, again, just posing your question, rephrasing in a different way, is when my negative emotions do come up, where am I running? Who am I looking to go and fix it? And can they actually fix it? Like
Yeah.
we need to bring it to the mechanic of all. We need to bring it to the one who formed our lives, shaped our lives, knows how we work better than we do, so that he can actually tell us what's going on wrong in the inside and provide a real and lasting solution.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and when it comes to relationships in that, I think sometimes like if I have a check engine light come on in my car, I call my dad and I'm like, hey, where do I need to go? And sometimes if you're in a healthy relationship, your significant other might point you back to, hey, go spend some time with the Lord.
That's good.
And so
Good.
even
Really-
being
that's really
lonely, if you're in a relationship, you can have somebody who's going to point you to where you need to go if you feel ill-equipped to find that yourself.
Yes.
So good. But it just takes being honest in your relationship too.
Yeah.
You know?
Seriously,
And, like-
communication, right?
Oh, hey, bro. Sometimes we feel like our relationship has to be perfect, and if something's not going right, or if I'm feeling a negative emotion in my relationship, I can't be honest with the person I'm in the relationship with, because we've tied so much our feelings to our identity that we're like, if we're feeling this, then we're saying maybe this isn't right, but maybe we're just feeling it for a different reason. It's like, if my feelings aren't who I am, this is how I'm feeling. Can you, I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? See, like you bringing it up with your girlfriend, you bringing it up with your wife, you're saying, hey, I'm having this, I don't know, temptation to be angry. Like, I don't really know where this is coming from. Can you help me? She's going to be like, hey, let's go to the Lord with it.
Yes.
Let's go to the Lord together. Let's attack this problem together. You're not angry with me. You're feeling the emotion of anger. And that's from the enemy. Let's go to the Lord and attack this together as teammates, rather
Yes.
than you need to figure out your crap, bro, and
Yeah.
just your attitude. It's like, no, like we have an enemy who's trying to separate us, right?
Yeah.
And let's war after him together.
That's a Proverbs 31 woman right there.
Yeah, it
A woman
is.
There
who
we go.
fears the Lord. Oh my goodness gracious.
Say it, bro. That's so
I think
good.
that's part of honoring your significant other in that. And so I know, Adrian, you were talking about a little bit earlier when I was talking to you, and what do you think about that question? How can we honor our significant other while dating them, but also not idolize them?
Yeah, that's so good. Honestly, I love that question where it says, okay, how can I honor the Lord, but also at the same time, how can I honor the girl, the woman, right? Because obviously you wanna treat her the way she deserves to be treated, right? You want to love her the way Jesus has actually shown that love to you. But it's like,
So
okay,
good.
how do I still do that without loving them more than loving the Lord, right? I think we gotta remember the Lord designed friendship, He designed relationship, and so actually when you're actually caring for your girlfriend, for your wife, for your Josh, for you to be your fiance, when you're asking them hey, what are you going through right now? Hey, are you doing okay? Hey, I'm gonna pray for you. Hey, let's talk about the Lord. How'd that make you feel? Hey, how's your day? Simple things like that. Actually, just caring, loving, that in itself is actually honoring to the Lord, because that's exactly how the Lord designed it. When Adam was in the garden with the Lord, the Lord, it says in 1 Peter that the Lord cares about what you care about, right? He says, cast your burdens unto me. So I'm guessing, if I was to say, the Lord was like, hey, Adam, how's your day going? What's going on in your life right now? Hey, how's work today? Hey, all these different questions. And if that's the original design that God had for relationships, is caring and loving and thinking about the other person, then when we're actually acting in that same manner towards our wife, our girlfriend, fiance, that in itself is very, very honoring to the Lord. I think idolizing, it comes down to where's your priorities at? When you wake up, do you think of them? When you wake up, is Jesus on your mind, or are they oh man, I just gotta love my girlfriend. I just gotta love my wife. Or is it, man, I'm gonna honor the Lord today. I'm gonna be obedient to the Lord today. I'm gonna walk in the Lord's will today. What does that look like? And from that question, you're pointed to, hey, care about your girlfriend. Hey, love your girlfriend. Hey, serve your wife. Then I think that's a pretty good sign. But Josh, I want to ask you, just like going from dating to being engaged, like did that switch at all from like idolizing? Was that ever like a struggle of, oh, now she's my fiance? Did that ever switch at all?
It's hard because she's still like, I get we have different like periods for it. It's basically like I'm still dating her. Like we like to like call it a different thing, but in reality, I'm still not in covenant with her. So it's the same thing as like dating her. And so in a way it's hard because like we're planning our finances, we're planning all these things, and we're looking ahead. So it's like, in a way in my brain, I can convince myself like, oh, like, well, we're going to be married. But the more you slip into that, like the easier it is to just slip into like sin, because doing things that you're only supposed to do in covenant when you're not in covenant is just sin. And so it's really easy to allow yourself to fall into that if you're not careful. And so I think the best way to honor them, for me, through engagement, is just knowing like she still technically is not mine. You know what I mean? Like she's not mine to like have right now. And so just honoring her, knowing like the thought that comes to my mind every time is like, if I had a daughter right now and somebody was treating my daughter the way that I treat Leah, would I be pleased? Like, would I be like, that's a good man. Like, I want you to stay with him. Like, you know what I mean? And so I think that's kind of the question that, obviously I have a good mindset of how I would view a daughter. So I guess if it depends on how you're raised, but for me, like my dad, I just grew up viewing daughters like a different way, like that they were supposed to be honored and they're supposed to like not be touched. You know what I mean? And so technically Leah is, she's my sister in Christ. She's not my wife. And so that's kind of how I have to look at it. And that 100% can be a struggle, but that's just where it kind of is right now.
Having the proper mindset on it too. With regard to like idolizing marriages or idolizing really anything, I've heard this said as well, and I think I would agree, is you are overwhelmed by whatever is first place in your life.
Yeah.
You are overwhelmed by whatever is first place in your life. Now, if Jesus is first place and you get overwhelmed by him and his goodness and his grace and his love and his justice and the fear of the Lord, you are going to live the best life because you were created to be overwhelmed by your Creator. But if you find yourself consistently being in anxiety over your relationship with your boyfriend or girlfriend, in anxiety, getting overwhelmed about your fiance or your husband or your wife, maybe they're in like a priority or they're in a place in your life that maybe God didn't intend for them to have.
That's good.
Right?
That's good.
Yeah, I even like how both of you, Josh and Adrian, you guys said the different levels of like girlfriend to fiance to wife. And I think like it's key in honoring them is just to honor the other gender, whether you're pursuing them or not. Like, what does it look like to treat your wife? Like, well, how do you want to treat your wife someday? Should be how you treat your fiance, should be how you treat your girlfriend, should just be how you treat the other women that you interact with on a regular basis, because that goes to like who you are. And so even though there's different stages or different levels of relationship, that core of how we choose to treat them, how we choose to honor them, if it's maintained from the initial meeting of friendship, like that's going to be, if you maintain it through all those stages, it's going to most likely lead to a marriage filled with continuing to honor them and continuing to love them and care for them in that same way. But if we allow each stage to start to shift our perspective to something different, which obviously can be difficult at different times, and I'm not engaged, I don't know what that looks like, I'm currently not in a relationship, but as we walk through those times, if we can continue to fix our eyes on honoring them in those different stages, I think that leads to a life of, none of us are married or have been married, but I think that's something that we all strive for. And as we hit those things throughout those different sections or eras of relationship, it'll lead to that lifelong not idolizing and continuing to honor the Lord and them in that.
That's good.
Yeah, it is so good.
I think something that helps me not, I guess, idolize her is viewing it as like, just because I went from single to dating doesn't mean I took like a step up. You know what I mean? And then now that I'm engaged, I'm not a step up. And then once I'm married, like there's only one narrow way and we're all following that same way.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that kind of makes me the question that was posed to us of like, what does the Bible actually say about singleness?
Mm-hmm.
And like, how do you know if you're called to that specific season of singleness? And I just kind of wanted to pose that one. Because I feel like we've talked a lot about dating and about being like all that stuff, and honoring the Lord, which is so great, but also there's a lot of, I mean, I spent most of my life single and had to walk in the Lord honoring that. And so just wanted to get that in as well.
So good. Singleness is a gift. And that's primarily how it's talked about all throughout the New Testament. You know, the Apostle Paul says he wishes that everyone were as he was. He was single his whole life. He says when you're married, your attention's divided between pleasing God and pleasing your wife or pleasing your husband. But when you're single, you're wholly devoted unto the Lord and passionate about pursuing him. Your one priority is pleasing him. And that's such a gift in order to have in that. But I think especially in West Michigan culture, but in a lot of cultures around the world, singleness is viewed as like a waiting period, and like really viewed as like a less than, you know, you're on the JV team, you know, until you get married and you'll get pulled up to varsity, you know, you're a little bit less than, viewed as a little bit. And it does feel like, oh, I'm progressing in life if I reach these milestones. But it might not be that case. It might be just a gift that God gives to you for the whole of your life. But if we're not careful, because it's viewed in this like level-ish kind of way, sometimes you can wish away your singleness, or you can honestly waste your singleness. But God has given you this period of your life as a single person in order to grow in your relationship with God and your relationship with others. But it's got to be intentional. You got to be intentional with your singleness. So
yeah, I think what you were saying there, that whole idea of like singleness, it's not divided attention, is when singleness is done in a healthy way, like with the Lord. Because there's also ways where when you're single, if your attention is split on finding that person and not on seeking the Lord and allowing him to bring him into your life, then that singleness is just as big of a burden, which is what we talk about, where Paul says like, yeah, if you can't follow this, go ahead and get married and take that next step, where it's like, okay, even in my singleness, how do I not get distracted by the hope of being in a relationship? And I'm 27. I've been in one relationship, like actual relationship. And at that point I was like, all right, I waited my time. I was 22. I dated somebody. I mean, date them a few months, get engaged, get married. That's how it goes. And when that ended, and now it's been another 5 years of singleness, there's an intimacy with the Lord that you find in choosing to wait with him, opposed to looking at it as who's that next person that I have the opportunity to pursue or check in with. But it's, Lord, as I pursue you and you present women who love you and honor you, it's like, oh, hey, maybe I might be interested in somebody. It looks very different if you take that time to spend with him and are devoted to actually being with him and not having your devotion split. Because if you have that longing and that desire, that passion, he'll provide for you in that. But if it's done in an unhealthy way where you're constantly searching for the next person you can pursue or whatever that looks like, it's just the same as when you're married and your attention is divided. And so what does it look like to, when you're single, realize, no, my status isn't less than, but I have the opportunity to pursue the Lord and see what he brings about. And it's just been an honor to do that with him over the last 5 years, in a season that I didn't think I was going to be single. So, yeah.
It's so good. That's so good. And some people question, like, okay, like, how do I balance, like, okay, seeking the Lord, but also, like, for you, Dre, like, being 27, like, obviously, I desire to be married. Like, how do I balance that? And I always heard this analogy of continue to pursue the Lord. Like, don't set your eyes off the Lord. But it's like, in that process of you seeking the Lord every single day, you'll look to your right, you'll look to the left, and you'll see maybe a cute girl doing the same thing you are. Like, oh, she's pursuing the Lord too. Like, she's kind of cute. So maybe I'll ask her out. And honestly, like, that's exactly what happened with me. Is like, it took a couple years, and I looked to the right, and I'm like, not bad. Maybe I'll ask her out. She's kind of cute. She loves Jesus. She has a beautiful heart. It's like, I'm going to go see it. Like, feel like sometimes the Lord just, like, puts someone in your path at the right time. Like, when you are content in the Lord. It's like, okay, just because I have this person in my life does not mean I'm going to stop pursuing the Lord. Because all of a sudden that person gets in your life. it's not a distraction, but you guys actually pursue the Lord together.
So
And
good, dude.
it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, and like that reminds me of Genesis 24 when Isaac, his mother, Rebecca, just passed away. And then Abraham sends his servant to go find him a wife. And when she brings, his mother Sarah, had passed away. Rebecca is Isaac's wife. But when the servant brings Rebecca to Isaac, where is Isaac at that time? It says that he was 40 years old. He's meditating in the field.
Wow.
And then his father's servant brings him his wife while he's meditating in the field. Like his eyes, Isaac's eyes, were set on the Lord, set in wholeness and in relationship with Christ. And as he was in that spot of wholeness, devotion to Jesus, literally, like the servant comes and brings the wife, and it's just like, yeah, you find somebody right there, right next. I think there's a lie in our generation as a whole, and this lie is that you've missed it, that you're too late.
Wow.
And if you don't do something, you better do something quick, because if you don't, then it's not going to happen. And it's really this war against trusting in Jesus. But there is a generation, I think, rising, a generation of men who are saying, God, I refuse to take anything that you have not given me.
That's good.
I'm going to wait for you.
Yeah.
And it's not a vow against, or it's not a license to passivity that I'm sitting on my hands. God, you better bring this, like, to just write to me, Amazon, deliver it to me to my door.
Yeah.
And no, it's not like a license for passivity, but it is an intentional step towards trust and dependence on Jesus. God, I'm going to stay tied to you. And if you say go, I'm going to go. If you say wait, I'm going to wait, but I'm not missing anything from you,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
hey, y'all, this has been great. I love this conversation. Sorry, I'm cutting off. I feel like I could chat with y'all all day,
For
which is
sure.
so good.
Yeah.
But dude, this is so good. And as we continue just to pursue Jesus in singleness and relationships, is just the biggest thing is Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, dating, relationship, singleness, all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your path straight. So
It's good.
it's been a good conversation. We love you guys listening and
on.
watching. We'll see you next time.
See y'all.
Yeah.